Hi there, my name is Cassidy and I'm using for the same. I'm here to interview Jack Carr, who's standing to be Director of Representation. Hi Jack.
Hi.
Why do you want to be the Director of Representation?
I feel it's really important to represent students, particularly at the university level. It's something that I have dedicated so many years of my time here at St Andrews to doing. So, for example, 2 years ago I was the school president for history and I represented 1,500 history students in all areas of their academic study. And then for the past year I've been sitting on the Wellbeing Subcommittee of the Union, working with both the Union and student services and our various affiliated societies to make sure that we bring in events that are relevant to student well-being, obviously, mostly mental health, but also physical health and sexual health.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that would sort of be my next question, the idea of experience. Yep. So do you feel like your position as school president, as president of school pastory and the Wellbeing Committee, do you think that's prepared you adequately for the job of Director of Representation?
Absolutely. My nomination, my manifesto is a collaborative effort between myself, the two faculty presidents, and the Wellbeing Officer. So we have it completely covered in terms of the policies within the union. Mm-hmm. It's a role that requires experience because you are dealing with very strong figures inside the university, as well as within the union. And you need to be able to make sure things always get done. You need to be organised, and you need to be used to this kind of high-paced pressure that, like, when I was school president for history, I was doing 30 hours a week in academic representation plus my degree. You need to be able to always be on top of things, and I think that you need experience to be able to say with confidence that you can handle that kind of role. And like as I said, I've spent several years now covering pretty much every remit and area of the DOREP's remit. So yeah, I do feel I'm experienced.
If you'd been the DOREP this year,
yes.
What do you feel that you could have done better? And not just better than what Joseph Tillo has done this year as Director of Representation, but sort of generally within the sort of remit of Director of Representation, what do you feel would have been better if you'd had the job?
What a question. Mm-hmm. Well, I can focus on some things that I know that would have happened. So, for example, the leave of absence returning scheme was impossible for me to work on this year because I was away during the summer and I had to work to support my study. So that kind of, we originally had a vision with student services, myself, Andre, the previous DOREP, we're working with them to have a re-engagement program that would support them both in their well-being, their social reintegration and their academic reintegration to university. That fell by the wayside slightly over the summer, and I'm not saying that was Joe, because Joe was very busy during handover and so was Andre. But like that's the kind of thing that like I would have focused on and been able to deliver had I been in the role last year rather than a student last year.
So yeah, you mentioned your idea for helping students with extenuating circumstances there, and obviously that's part of your manifesto again this year.
Yes.
And so if you want to just sort of go into detail about how, what you say you want to do is you want to standardise the entire policy across the university to help students who maybe have extenuating, not just leave of absence, but any student with extenuating circumstances. Do you really want to go into detail about that?
Well, firstly, probably easiest to say what extenuating circumstances are. They can be any kind of health problem, be that physical or mental. They can be, you could be leaving to go and work for a year to raise money to study if you're struggling, or they could be the loss of a loved one. It covers a lot of different things. So standardization is quite difficult in that case. But at the moment, it can be widely treated and very, very, very differently according to which school you're in. I feel like this is something that needs to be engaged with on a very personal level between the students who are affected by this, because it's not necessarily every student, but it's a significant number, and the DOREP, which you need the kind of confidentiality that the DOREP role brings to be able to do something effectively about. And then gather a lot of feedback, information, experiences, so that you understand exactly what the situation is in every single individual school, and then take that to the proctor who is in charge of learning and teaching, with a policy, a paper for learning and teaching committee, and try and get some agreements with with the learning and teaching committee to improve how we treat students and make sure that it's fair no matter what school you're in.
So do you feel that it would be possible during your time as, if you get elected as Director of Representation, to sort of, even if not as completely standardised, but at least greatly sort of create a greater degree of uniformity across the school's policies? Do you think it's a feasible thing to do?
I feel like this is something that shows sort of like where my experience comes in. because the university as a whole, their general feeling and their general policy would be to try and unify everything and try and make it more standard, with a lot of respect for the schools. But the schools are very independent, and they love their independence. They can guard it fiercely. And in many ways, it's better to work through the school presidents, who obviously know their role absolutely, their school inside out. And then so basically, in my vision, the DOREP would be working at university level and with the school presidents and education committee. And the school presidents would be advocating for this kind of policy change within their schools as well. And I feel like if you have everyone working together in tandem, it should be very possible to have significant improvements. And I mean, they would be meaningful. They would make such a difference to students who have the most difficult circumstances at this university's career. And I feel like it's only fair that we give everyone the same kind of chance.
So obviously mental health is something you think is you're quite passionate about. It's something you mentioned in your manifesto as well, not just physical health. So do you want to go into the importance of that and how that would come into your extenuating circumstances proposal and how it would be implemented?
Mental health is invisible. It's an invisible illness. So I'm not going to completely differentiate between mental health and physical health, because a lot of physical health problems are completely invisible as well. For example, I have Crohn's disease, and I've been in remission for years, but when it's flaring up, no one can tell. And when it comes to problems within schools, it's that inability to just look at someone and tell that can be the problem. So mental health is a disproportionate problem with the extenuating circumstances, because it's not the easiest thing to just be like, well, that's clearly the situation. That can be written off, and then you can get your extensions, for example. It's more a case of just training every single director of teaching to make sure that they understand mental and physical illnesses that are invisible, to ensure that they can be compassionate when they're making academic decisions, and also take on board professional advice, whether that's from the NHS or from student services.
In sort of the past year, I was wondering if you could name me sort of one good thing that you'd like to see more of that happened in the past year, and possibly say one bad thing that you feel could have been improved upon in the past year.
Okay. If in the past year, I think Mental Health Awareness Week was run far more effectively than it's ever been run before. We had 2 visiting speakers, one of whom was Johnny Benjamin, who's a very famous mental health advocate. And I picked him up in Edinburgh and spent 12 hours with him before he did a speech. Great guy. Yeah, I feel like that was done very well. We had a lot of engagement with our student societies, so Student Minds and Nightline as well. I think that was very well run. In terms of things that could be done better, I feel like class rep elections this year did not go entirely to plan. A lot of there was some drama with wrong options and various other things. That's just the kind of thing that is easily rectified by someone knowing how to run an election from the start and having done it before. And when I was school president for history, I ran the school president and the class rep elections pretty much independently, and they went fine. We had the highest turnout ever, if I remember right. Mainly because I promised everyone cake.
Okay. So sort of one other thing is, what would you feel sets you apart, not just from the other candidates in the race for director representation, but or other past DOREPs in the past, or past candidates for DOREP, or even any other current past candidates? What's your unique selling point?
Well, this is probably the big difference from last year. Last year, my unique selling point was that I was the most experienced in education. This year, I think my unique selling point is that I have covered every area of the remit. I have been in Wellbeing Committee, I have been on education, as school president for history. I also have an intense amount of personal experience. All of these problems that I speak about in extenuating circumstances affected me several years ago. I had to go into a meeting with the director of teaching and justify the fact that I wasn't able to turn up to classes in the mornings, despite the fact that all my tutors had said that Jack's doing the work, we're happy to support him in the class. And I actually nearly got kicked out of the uni. That's something that eventually, it was all resolved, but it was a lot of stress at the time, and that made everything worse for me as well. And I feel like that's the kind of thing that's easy to avoid, and it's the kind of thing that you understand better if you've got this personal experience than just knowing that it is a problem and therefore trying to fix it. it gives me a bit more drive, I suppose.
Yeah, you referenced it briefly there, but obviously you ran for director of representation last year. It was a very close race, but obviously most of the people watching will probably remember. So I suppose the question is, obviously you didn't win. So why would you say people should vote for you this year if they didn't vote for you last year?
Last year, Joe and I were on an absolute par, which reflected in the fact that the votes went 50%, 50-50 each way in every single round of elimination until we were tied in the penultimate one, and then eventually won by 6. Like, I feel like I wish you'd just ask the people who supported me last year to vote again, and hopefully another 6 people will turn up. Why should they vote for me the second time? Because I'm better than I was the first time. I have a wealth of experience that's better than it was before. I have more experience within the union, which I think was the main point that people were worried about. As I said, I'm on 3 subcommittees of this over the past couple of years. In fact, 4 subcommittees. I lose track. So the main worry was I didn't have union experience, and I think everyone now knows me as that person in the unions. It's just vote based on experience and realistic policies, and those are all things that I've said I would give last year, and I've given again this year. And I just hope that people will trust me to be able to do that. Yeah.
Moving on to more specific parts of your manifesto. One of the things I noticed when reading over it is there are lots of proposals. A lot, especially you divide it into 3 sections of the three main of the areas that the DOREP is in charge of: well-being, equal opportunities, representation, education, and that's mobility, obviously, but they all commend it, and democracy, obviously. But one of the things I noticed is obviously there's a lot, and I was wondering, do you maybe feel that you're overstretching yourself, over-promising, you won't be able to deliver all of them?
Not at all. Mainly because a lot of the policies that are on there are using exactly the same mechanisms to address 2 different issues. So, for example, study abroad re-engagement scheme is exactly the same mechanisms as a leave of absence integration scheme. They don't work together. You can't shove everyone together because it's different circumstances, and that would be unfair. But if you can set up one, you can set up the other, and you can do them in tandem. A lot of the other policies are to be run by subcommittee heads. So, for example, supporting Pangea, which is the Equal Opportunities Festival last year, that comes under the Equal Opportunities Officer's role, and it's just making sure that they know what they're doing, they have a vision, and they have all the support that they need to be able to do it. In terms of things that I would do myself, there are some really big projects, like the extenuating circumstances one would be a huge one, but equally I have the passion to carry it out. And I mean, I'm sitting here a year after the last election saying that I still care about these issues. I think, if anything, no one can criticise my commitment. So, I have no doubt that as much as there's a lot of proposals there, they're all achievable within the course of a year with an effective team.
Okay. Moving on to the equal opportunities part of your manifesto. One of the things, you said this at the very beginning of it, that you also said that one of your main priorities as DOREP would be to represent traditionally underrepresented groups within the University of students, such as citing women, ethnic minorities, mature students, disabled students, etc. And but going on specifically towards the end of the equal opportunities section, you name things like sort of supporting Shag Week, making sure it happens again. You obviously mentioned Pangea there, making sure obviously that happens again, is fully supported. But one thing I was wondering on issues sort of sexual health and Pangea and other sort of to do with racial minorities, I didn't really see any sort of new ideas. Is there any sort of anything new that you would want to introduce?
I think it's in many ways making sure that exactly this, these can all be improved. It's like Mental Health Awareness Week happened the year before last, but this year it was a completely different deal. You can barely compare the two. And the same can be said for any of these things. If you put more into them, they can become much bigger things, and they can be fantastic. And it just requires the right DOREP to be able to do this. But in terms of saturating the calendar with even more events, that's not necessarily the aim. The aim is to make sure that what we do is absolutely perfect for the students that we're trying to deliver a service for. And I would much rather have one sexual health awareness week and then campaigns throughout the year than have one that's kind of a bit iffy, and then another one that's kind of a bit iffy later. And it's about making sure that you have the kind of impact with the first one that it's required, and then making sure it's supported throughout the year with the right kind of publicity and just awareness raising.
One of the things you also talk about in the opportunities bit is the Stand Together initiative that was introduced this year, and obviously specifically their got consent programme.
Yeah.
But obviously, and you obviously expressed your support for that. You said you want to continue and make sure it gets fully promoted. But the Stand Together initiative, which is obviously about sort of community students from the university and people in town and organisations and institutions from across St Andrews sort of coming together to sort of on various different issues. Is there any sort of specific initiatives or programmes that you would like to see introduced under the Stand Together initiative?
I feel like part of it is integrating the Stand Together initiative better within the union as well. So I'd quite like to have them involved with wellbeing, and then wellbeing involved with them to make sure everything's fine. Stand Together could, for example, help out quite easily on wellbeing things on Raisin, and where we ran a water stand last year, and it was great fun because I got to sit there and look at really tall people and try and convince them that I wasn't from the Christian Union, and with very limited success. The May Dip as well. These are things that require us to all come together as a community and look after each other, which I think falls under the basic overarching theme of Stand Together. And got consent as well, I feel can be better integrated with wellbeing, so that we have like a member representing them on our committee. Because at the moment it doesn't, they're not there. I feel like that is the kind of thing that would facilitate growth in the way and development within the student body as well.
In the sort of area of sexual health and consent, which is obviously are huge issues among students and across society right now, but there's especially some things that students are concerned about. Is there anything that like you would like to see the union doing more on in terms of sexual health or consent?
One of the things we were looking at that I really like the idea of is posters for drug testing for spiked drinks. If that's possible, then I would love to bring that in because it was such a great policy at the time. Idea within the Wellbeing Committee, and I feel like if you divert more resources into it, then it should be possible to do it. That's the kind of thing that would it would make a big difference as well. But yeah.
One of the things you speak about later on is the idea of non-alcohol events for students who, and you say for students, so students aren't pressured into it. Do you think that's too much of a problem right now in first year? Do you think that, and that's why they're needed, or do you think? I
don't think it's so much. It's too much of a problem. I think it's more that it needs to be and it needs to be something that an option that's available to people. And I mean, we're in a town which has probably, which does have more pubs per square mile than anywhere else in Scotland and potentially the UK. We have a drinking culture, there's no denying that. And that's not for everyone. A lot of people object on religious or health reasons. I mean, I was teetotal for a year. And I feel like it can be quite intimidating to go out to a pub when you're not partaking in drinking. I think that the university's non-alcohol accommodation is a fantastic idea, and I think that we need to be able to offer these options to people. So we need to have like coffee mornings rather than wine receptions, which, to be honest, the union is very guilty of, with like class reps and things. And just make sure that there's always an alternative that will avoid like intimidating or upsetting or just not making people uncomfortable. There's no reason for it.
To move back to the area of mental health, and not just mental health, but sort of any sort of groups for students, one of your ideas is introducing support groups for students through, you said, working with Nightline and other groups within the university who obviously work in student services, obviously. How would these support groups work and how would they help students?
Mental health support groups are normally actually under student minds who provide training, facilitating for like student leaders to effectively engage with these support groups. I can't speak. At the moment we have them for eating disorders, but I feel like we can expand that to cover a range of other mental health issues. Sorry, what was the second? Was it also your problem?
Just sort of how they would work.
How would they work? In my mind, the union can subsidise coffee quite easily. In fact, we do quite often. We can put aside rooms. We can create an environment that people are happy to go and talk about their anything that's affecting them and make them comfortable. So yeah, I think that that's something that's very, very easy to do. Which is why, like, in terms of your time commitment question, these are things that can be organised very quickly by someone who's driven enough to do it. So.
In terms of other events you'd like to set up as DOREP, one of the things you mentioned is exam de-stress events. I was just wondering if you go into more sort of specific events that you had in mind.
It would be like a wellbeing fair, in the same kind of model of like the charities summer fair that we have, and various other ones, where basically we would set up either in the union or outside the library various stands that people can go to partake in various stress relieving. So you could have mindful colouring, for example. You could have meet the guide dog puppies, which is always a massive success during exams. Just various things to allow people to have a break from their high pressure study and study periods, particularly like in first semester. So yeah, I'd probably try and combine it with first semester more in second as well.
One of the things that I found particularly interesting about the manifesto was your idea of formalised training for the SRC and SSC members. I know, obviously, I've sat in a lot of SRC and SSC meetings this year, and I know it's something that a lot of the members have been concerned about. Why do you think why do you think this extra or formalised training is necessary, and how would you formalise it? How would you make it more?
Handovers are notoriously difficult to carry out. So for example, when I went into school president of history, I didn't get a handover. I got a coffee and say, "Well done, Jack," and I was sent off. And I didn't have minutes for any time in the previous 2 years because the two previous history presidents hadn't done very much. Or I had to go and look for them in the school department, which was just embarrassing. And it's these kind of, it was good for me because it meant I could redefine the role, but equally it meant that I didn't really know what the role should be. And the same applies to the SRC. Like, there's a lot of representative members who come into their roles not having a huge amount of experience and not really knowing what the role is. And basically, you just need to create a strong framework for how to have these handovers, maybe in like a day where you, as well, on top of like a handover pack, which we're currently doing, which is great. But like, have a day where you all just sit down and you talk about what your roles are, how the SRC is going to work. Training is good at the moment, but it can be improved, and I feel like that would fall under my remit to carry out.
One of the things to speak about also is, in terms of representation, increasing transparency and accountability of student representatives. How would you like to do this, and why do you think it's important?
Nothing annoys me more than seeing no report submitted in any of the minutes. And I won't even pretend that I have any, it really annoys me. Because how do you know what they're doing? And like, they could be doing their role fantastically, and quite often they are, but unless you tell me that, I'm not going to know that. So, and it's the same for anyone. I mean, I'm definitely over-engaged with the union, and sometimes I sort of wonder. So it's about making sure that there's a culture where it's unacceptable to not report on what you're doing and explain what you're doing and give feedback to both the people who are in your circle in the union, but also to your electorate who put you in that position. As school president, I wrote a report, and it was 12 pages long, and it was ridiculous, and only some very few keen beans read it. But that became the model for how we do end of semester reports now. And it was used as the example this year of how a school president should be able to tell their school what they've been working on, what projects they're following. These are the kinds of things that should be available from everyone, and they shouldn't be relegated to a couple of paragraphs. You should have to explain what your role is and why you're doing it, and how well you feel you're doing it. It should be reflective.
So one final question on your manifesto that and we spoke about it a bit earlier as well, but if you want to just go into detail, because obviously I know it's something that you've written about it for the same before, you've written about it, and you've spoke about it quite a lot, is the idea that it's often very difficult to transition back into university life if you've had to take a break. I was wondering if you want to speak about your plans to help that, and why you think it's important.
The university, this is actually one of the great ones, and another example of being able to use experience. We currently have funding available to us for student transitions, and this can literally be defined by the people who are awarding the money as any kind of transition from one thing to another. So this could be the students, fourth year students leaving and going into further study, or fourth year students leaving and going into work, leave of absence students returning, study abroad people coming back. It's very, very wide reaching. but there's money for it, a huge amount of money for it. The door rep sits in the awarding committee for the basically signing off these grants. And it's about making sure that like groups know that they have this option, and there is someone in that committee there who is very, very keen to see these projects being brought to life. And it would fall on me effectively to both help support them in applying for this kind of money and support, and also then delivering more support on my own side as well afterwards. But yeah, reintegration and I've forgotten the word, all of transitions, is something the university is very keen on at the moment to work on, and therefore it's a very, very easy thing, well not easy, but very, very good opportunity for the door rep candidate to utilise.
So as one final question, just to sum up, if there's anything else I haven't mentioned, you will mention it now, but why people should vote for you to be the Director of Representation? Okay.
The Director of Representation is probably one of the most important roles in this town that's going to affect your I'll start again. The door rep covers your academic experience, your well-being during that academic experience, and making sure that everyone has the opportunity in the first place to have an experience in St Andrews. Those things are absolutely crucial to your study. And even if you don't know exactly what the door rep does, you probably realise it's a very important job, particularly if you've sat through about 20 minutes of an interview with the role. And you need experience to do that. And you need someone who knows exactly how the role works before they're going into it. You need someone who has done things within this role. So like the school president thing, that's basic academic representation. And I mean that's the kind of foundation blocks for like going further up. You need to have these kind of like working relationships already formulated. So like within the university as well as within the union, in order to be able to do the job effectively. And you need to be able to spend your year working on your policies rather than just establishing yourself as like learning your job, because you only have 1 year. And 1 year is not a huge amount of time in university speak, because we've had 603 of them. So like you have to be able to hit the ground running, and that's something I can do because, as I said, I have many times over the course of this interview, I've covered the remits very well in my the past 2 years, and during my 5 years at St Andrews, and just I don't know. I just hope that people will trust me to know that I have not said anything in here that I would not do for them, for people. And it would make realistic and meaningful change, and that's the important thing to me.
Thank you for speaking to us, Jack. Thank you everyone for watching. Make sure to share the rest of our interviews online at the same website or our YouTube channel. Is there certain issues you're talking about there?
Well, it's mostly based on accommodation. That's the big topic at the moment. People aren't really talking about all the other things because they've been kind of shoved to the background. But with all the changes, like with Ayton House, like when Ayton House was announced and we heard the prices for it and the fact that the university was endorsing this from a private company, we couldn't really figure out why. Students just couldn't wrap their heads around it.